and welcome. Kia ora and welcome to our COVID-19 update as the government moves from Alert Level 4 to Alert Level 3. We're recording this event today so that if you're able to have this available for your other staff, and it'll be on our website under the COVID-19 resources. We have a number of questions that you've already asked, and there's a lot of them there, and we're very appreciative of that. And we also formed these into some themes for the Q&A today. We'd also like to welcome some more questions from you, and you can click on the Q&A icon. And attendees can also upvote a question that you would like to see answered as well. You can also click the chat button and start or participate in a chat with the rest of the audience. Today's about providing more clarity and certainty to a move back to Alert Level 3. Level 3 moves from essential services to safe services. I think it's important to remember that we're operating during this pandemic within the Health and Safety at Work Act, and WorkSafe will be the key agency for implementing this work. There will be a requirement for everyone who's operating to put in place a COVID-19 plan for every work site and to make this available for employees and for customers. So on with the webinar. Today we've got Paul Jarvie from the EMA. We've also got Paul MacKay from Business New Zealand. Unfortunately, WorkSafe was unable to be here today, but we're in pretty safe hands because both have actually been working very closely with WorkSafe, and so I think they'll be able to answer most of the questions. So it's my pleasure to first of all introduce our speaker, Paul Jarvie, Manager of Employment Relations and Safety from the EMA within the Business New Zealand network. Paul sits on many government committees as the employer representative, including at the ILO based in Geneva. He's developed many health and safety courses and publications for the EMA. I'll pass you on to Paul, who's going to give us sort of a 5-minute introduction.
Thank you, Virginia. Yes, so we're moving into COVID level 3 on Tuesday at midnight on Monday, Tuesday. That clearly is not going to be an open gate rush back to work as business as usual. What it does mean is that some other businesses will now be able to operate, but I can clearly say it will not be business as usual, and some operators will still not be able to open. There are many requirements that businesses need to put in place before they start operating again under COVID level 3. And these are reasonably onerous in terms of the planning stage, but also the implementation stage. It's very important to understand that what the government is trying to achieve through their regulatory regime is that workplaces can open, but they are safe workplaces. The safe workplaces has two distinct meanings. One is it's safe from the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, but equally and at the same time, it's also a safe return to work in terms of your health and safety obligations under the health and safety legislation. So those two things run hand in hand. In fact, are one and the same. Fundamental to this is the principle of social distancing. And we know, and the first principle is at least 2 meters. So you're going to have to try and reorganize your work so all your staff are working at least 2 meters. There are some provisos which we can talk about through the questions about coming less than 2 meters. The other major principle is that even though you've got the 2 meter rule in place, that personal hygiene and hygiene in and around the workplace is absolutely vital. So things like washing of hands, sterilising high touch points is absolutely vital. The Prime Minister in her speech yesterday made it very, very clear that if you can continue to work with people working at home, then that's what you should do. So this is not about calling everyone back to work tomorrow or on Tuesday rather. So if you can still have people working from home, that is the preferred option. In terms of a health and safety plan, which we can talk about later in some detail, this is going to be a requirement that all businesses have a health and safety plan. It should be developed in line with your staff and safety reps and safety committees, that all your staff know what that plan is, because fundamentally what you're going to be doing when you go back into your workplace is not going to be the same working regime as you had prior to going into COVID level 14. It's going to be a different way of doing work, and that's going to be for the duration of level 3. That of itself might pose some risks. You might have a decreased staffing number, you might have more separation between staff, so you need to consider what risks have increased by my new regime in terms of what I'm putting into place. So this is not business as usual. It is a slow restart into business, but it's a slow restart with the absolute caveat that it's got to be safe in terms of the staff not being exposed to the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, but equally it's safe in terms of health and safety regulations. So that is, in a very, very small nutshell, is what we're trying to achieve. Paul?
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to echo what Paul has just said, but there's a couple of other things I think that bear remembering too. As Paul's described, the process of going to level 3 is not an easy one, and for some businesses it won't in fact be possible because the inability to avoid contact will make that impossible to make work. The other thing though is it's very tempting to try and say, well, if I can do this, if I can do that, or it's not that much, risks the business becoming the source of the first business cluster of the disease, and as has been said before on a number of meetings today, nobody wants to be the business that starts another cluster up. And the point that arises out of that is that while it might take you a week or more to get yourself ready to go back to level 3, it will take only the length of time it takes the Prime Minister to sign an order going back to level 4 to go back there. So in other words, we have got to work really hard to get to level 3 and to stay there, because reverting to level 4 is literally a moment's decision. And of course, if the disease gets loose inside the business workplace, that is of course going to be catastrophic in a number of ways in terms of being locked down for even longer. So we're getting a chance based on the incredible results that New Zealand has achieved to date, but it is a chance. It's not a guarantee and it's not a way out. It's simply another quite small step, or sorry, a reasonable step in the direction of getting back to a fully operational economy. The other one is just to re-emphasize again and again the issue of separation. And that brings to the question of bubbles. A lot of people have said, does level 3 mean we can have different bubbles? The government's website, the COVID website, and the Department of Health guidelines are quite clear that the bubble remains your family bubble. But of course there is, which is why separation becomes such an issue, because the requirements within your bubble are basically you can operate as a normal family unit. Anything outside that is to operate under the separation rules. So if we look, for instance, at the guidelines that have appeared since yesterday around the level 3 issue, yes, we can do a little bit more sports, but it's very clear in the guidelines that, for instance, you shouldn't share sporting equipment. That can translate, or the principle of that can translate to workplaces too. So if you're thinking about having workplaces where people share equipment, then find another way to do that, because if it's not good enough for people to share recreational equipment, then neither is it good for people to share any other form of equipment or come into contact through that shared equipment. And of course, it then emphasizes the need for excessive levels of hygiene, where anything is in fact going to be touched by more than one person. So as Paul mentioned, high touch points, the smoker room kettle, whatever it might be, there will have to be some real thinking and planning and some protocols put in place for you to demonstrate that you've got all of these issues covered. So I'll leave it there. There's been bound to be lots of questions, and let's maximise the time we have for those.
Sorry about this. I will just. Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry about that. Look, I thought I must explain too, we get a lot of questions around what's the relationship of Business New Zealand really and the Otago Southland Employers Association. We're one of 4 organisations that make up the Business New Zealand network. We work directly with ministers, with government officials to help shape support packages, escalate issues and continue to advocate for business support. And Paul's very much involved in that. He deals directly both with ministers and government officials. And Paul, he's the Manager of Employment Relations Policy for Business New Zealand. And he's worked in employment relations in the private and public sectors, including the energy sector, professional services, and in manufacturing. So he's got a very diverse background. I think we'll go straight to some questions now. And just remember that you can actually upload your questions live here today as well, and we'll have a look at those. And of course, you can actually upvote a question as well if it's one that you want to have heard. So the first question I think I'll send to Paul Jarvie first. Do you have an example of a COVID-19 health and safety plan for returning back to work? And does WorkSafe also have something on this as well? If I go to you, Paul, first.
Thank you. We just finished a webinar just before starting this one where we had a spokesperson from WorkSafe, and they are going to probably in the next short while, maybe tomorrow, put up a generic kind of template for a health safety plan. But that again will be discretionary whether you use it or not. But thinking about your own place, I think a plan can look like anything that you like, so long as you're covering the points about work, transmission points, and how you're going to manage a safe workplace. So if you think about that kind of from a logical perspective, you've got staff coming to work. So what do you need to think about when staff are travelling to work? Is it in their own vehicle? Is it in your vehicles? And what can you do inside those areas? Then you've got staff who are entering the workplace. So fundamental to that will be the notion of signing in. So you'll need to know who's at work and where they're going to be working. You're also going to need to assess whether they may be at risk in terms of, are they the COVID-19 virus carrier? And what I mean by that is, are they showing any signs or symptoms consistent with that kind of illness? So that could be done via a questionnaire, some form of medical assessment. I know some companies are using the handheld thermometer, but we certainly wouldn't recommend that. When staff are entering the workplace, if they've been away on lockdown for over a month now, then I strongly suggest that they be reinducted back into the workplace under this new working regime, because it's going to be different from what they left. And you can't assume that people will just get used to it. You have to show that staff know what to do underneath this regime, this new working regime. And that might be in terms of changing training schedules. It might be in terms of changing your SOPs, whatever it is. Staff need to be made aware of those changes. Equally fundamental to the whole process is that staff need to be involved, hopefully, in the development of your safety plan, so they are familiar with it, but equally your safety reps and all committees. So that gets you through the front door. So now you're at work. And again, you're going to have to think about, where are people working and what do they do? And if what they do and where they're working requires them to work in a space that's less than 2 meters, you're going to have to think about, well, how can I separate them? How can I make them still at work, but work further apart? Now that might mean a whole lot of manning issues. You might need to do some rejigging of your plant and equipment, change your process around, whatever it takes is what you're going to have to do to try and maintain that 2 meter gap. We'll talk about 1 meter gap later on. Also, you're going to have to think about when you've got contractors coming to work. So if you've got a maintenance issue that requires an external contractor, they also will be coming into your workplace. They also could be carriers. They'll need to sign in. They'll need to be tested to make sure that they are not carriers. But equally, if those people also will need to understand that your system of work will apply to them while they're at work. You also need to think about when the people are at work in terms of smokos, where they go, what they do in their lunch breaks, the bathroom facilities. All those will need to be washed down and kept clean and tidy. You'll also need to have a very high hand washing regime put into place as well. And then you've got to think about when people leave. You may have the best system in the world at work, but we all jump into one car and go home. So all your good work may be put at risk. So you need to think about educating your staff about how they may travel home. You may need to think about, well, if my staff are mobile, so if it's one person, one car, then that's pretty fine. But if you've got several people required to be in a vehicle, like a technician's vehicle or a working gang, then how's that going to work? And again, the 2 meter rule applies, and the 1 meter rule applies. So there are many layers that you need to consider to provide the safe place of work. And safe in this context means that you're trying to, at best possible, have that physical separation of at least 2 meters. If we look at the 1 metre rule, which is allowable, but under a huge caveat, and the caveat is that there must be other things in place, not just a 1 metre gap. So you've got to think about things like, well, what PPE might they need? Will they need to have a mask? Do they have a mask? Is it the right mask? Will they need to have gloves? Can I put in some physical shielding between this person and another person? And that's particularly the case on assembly lines where where products are going from left to right and stuff's being moved on. You might need to try and make that those people work further apart. What you don't want is people working opposite each other, so they're facing each other. Now you've got 2 breathing zones meeting in the middle, and that's not what, and that's the absolute worst case scenario. So there's a lot of things that you need to understand, and equally you have to understand that when you put in these changes, is of the changes themselves, do they create an extra risk? But if I go down from, say, a 5-man working team, and I can make it now work with 2, is that 2 working team going to be safe in terms of communications, in terms of emergencies, in terms of loading, in terms of workload? So all those things have to be part of your thinking. And this goes back to a comment that we both made earlier. This is not business as usual, and this can get quite onerous. So just to reiterate, a written plan is absolutely vital. There is going to be a plan up on, or a template on the on WorkSay's website. That will be fairly generic, but what I've just outlined the last couple of minutes would be sufficient to start off with. Paul?
Enough. I just add a little bit to what Paul said there. And Paul's talked about all of the things that are really important when it comes to managing your staff and the people that your staff are going to interact with. The other feature, of course, of going back to business is what I would call things, because you will all have product or ingredients or materials coming in and going out of your businesses, unless they are service-based businesses. And those things also need to be factored into your plan. So, for instance, being sure that the boxes of raw material that you might be wanting for your business are themselves safe when they come in. You don't want contaminated material coming into the hands of an otherwise safe workplace. So think about the people side of things, but also think about the things. Just quickly on the topic of plans, Paul's outlined the fact that WorkSafe will have a generic template, which is voluntary. It doesn't have to be used at all, but it will contain the essential elements of a plan and therefore will be useful. Something that the Business New Zealand Network is also doing is that a lot of industry associations, for instance, are already working on their particular industry and the issues that might be confronted by businesses in their industry, and of course are drawing up their own plans. What we're working on doing now is getting some central access to all of those, so that if you're in the boat building industry or the hairdressing industry or whatever else, there should be something from an industry-led body, be it the Hairdressers Association or the Meat Industry Association, which would be relevant to many others as well, because a lot of things will be common. Manufacturing processes often have commonalities. So there'll be something, hopefully there'll be more and more examples of other people's thinking that may be relevant and useful to yourself. And we'll be working to get that up and located in a central place as quickly as we can, aiming for before Tuesday. So there'll be resources that help you and examples of what other people have done that will help you as well.
Can I just add to that also, Paul, that on the EMA COVID site, we've put a whole lot of stuff up there just for manufacturing, and we launched a big webinar last night just for manufacturing. So on that site there's the manufacturing stakeholder plans, and there's also a set of useful tools and templates that you may want to get started with. So this is not a situation of starting off with a blank bit of paper. And I stress the point, this is just another extension of your health and safety obligations. So if you're using the same protocols, your same documentation under your health and safety kind of obligations, this shouldn't be too difficult. The difficult part is assessing the risk and trying to reorganize your manning and staffing distances levels.
Thank you for that. Also to say as well, we've got, through the Business New Zealand network, we've got a level 3 checklist, which you can find on our COVID-19 resource page as well. So that's there too. And I think we're also going to get copies of all the different industry plans too, where we're going to put those up so that you can access those. Our next question is around, what does self-accreditation look like, and do we need to register if we're operating at alert level 3? Perhaps Paul MacKay might be able to help with that one.
Yeah, to date, there is no requirement to register or accredit in the sense of getting a certificate or somebody signing off. What the government has done, and as the Prime Minister explained yesterday, the requirements for